This week, from last Tuesday, the 18th of January, till next Tuesday, the 25th of January, many of the Christian churches in the Northern Hemisphere will be celebrating the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity. This year's celebrations, the convener of the celebrations was the Middle East Council of Churches, whose headquarters are in Beirut, Lebanon. And of course, the overall umbrella for this ecumenical yearly endeavor comes from the World Council of Churches in Geneva, Switzerland. Now, the theme for this year that was chosen by the churches of the Middle East through the Middle East Council of Churches comes from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 2. We saw the star in the east and we came to worship him. Now, it's interesting because the first thing I would like to say here is, what is the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity for a lay person like me? Well, the words in that title are self-defining. It's a week, 1 week, 7 to 8 days of prayer for Christian. So we're talking about the Christian religion, unity, in other words, coming together. And one other way, a little bit fancier, of explaining the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity is to say that it is an ecumenical endeavor. And by ecumenical, I mean at the sort of grassroots level of Christian men and women across the world, and in this particular case, across those celebrating this event, to come together and to celebrate their common belief in Jesus Christ as the Savior of the Christian faithful. Now, you might say, aren't they united anyway? Or some of you might say exactly the opposite, smirk and say, oh, Harry is painting a nice picture. We know how divided the churches are. Well, there is some truth in both statements. Churches across the world, not only in the Northern Hemisphere and not only in the Middle East, North Africa region, they all are united in that they believe in the person of Jesus from Nazareth, who was born only a few weeks ago in Bethlehem in Palestine, who will then, across the liturgical year, be betrayed, be crucified, rise up again, the resurrection, and then the ascension into heaven. And that forms the core of the Christian belief, the person of Jesus Christ. However, there are also divisions, there are serious divisions among the churches, not only between the Orthodox, the Catholic, and the Reformed churches, but within each of those traditional families as well. And this is where I think that ecumenism stumbles, but it is also where ecumenism strives to bring those churches together in order to respect and adhere to the core values of the faith, rather than on the issues of, do we believe in this interpretation or do we believe in that interpretation? Is the translation of Greek into other languages correct, or should the translation be different? Which church is the first church and which ones are followers? All these are issues that, believe you me, come up time and time again amongst Christian churches who sometimes wish to create a hierarchy, a kind of, oh, I'm the father and you are the children kind of attitude. Now, a few days ago, I was listening to an Armenian priest, actually, who was talking about something that he called the cafeterialization of our faith. What he meant by that is that different people, different Christians in different churches, Armenians, Greeks, Copts, Anglicans, Lutherans, whatever, that we tend to basically look at our faith, pick and choose what we like and adhere to that, and reject what we don't like in the teachings because it doesn't suit our temperament, our circumstances, whatever. And he said it's like going into a cafeteria and choosing a coffee, a flat white instead of an espresso, and a black Americano instead of a green tea. There is some truth in that, and it does happen. But what is equally true is that cafeteriaization is not, in my opinion, only within the followers, the parishioners of any one church or any one country. Actually, it is within the clerical structures, within the church structures and institutions themselves. Why? Because if you go back to the early church, when you had that sort of random number of people who were following Christ and then who went out to different parts of the world, Mark, Thaddeus and Bartholomew and others, in order to evangelize. And this is how gradually that small higgledy-piggledy group of Christian followers of Jesus became more and more institutionalized into what we know today as the Christian faith of well over 1 billion followers. That these people were at the beginning following the teachings and promoting the teachings of Jesus. Later, they started competing with each other as to how they understand that teaching and how they understand their faith. So for me, I would take it a couple of steps further than what the Armenian priest was talking about in his own concept of cafeteriaization, about the lay people, the worshippers, basically picking and choosing what they accept and what they reject, into saying that that also happens with the churches themselves. And they basically disagree over what was the nature of Jesus Christ. Was he more human or was he more divine? What about other things? What about the wording of the Nicene Creed? All these things are things that come up. And the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity, for me at least, is an attempt to try and remind Christians, or at least those for whom their faith matters, that there is more than those differences. And one of the things I remembered in the past, from my past, is that I always used to talk, when I used to speak about these things much more frequently, unity of Christians, of course, I'm talking, is not in uniformity. It's not a question of everybody being the same color, everybody believing exactly the same thing, everybody having the same expression and tradition and culture. But unity is not in uniformity. Unity is in diversity. But that diversity also has its core, and that is what is important for us to retain today. Now, I will add one little point here, is that I said that most of the churches will be celebrating for the week 18 to 25 January, but tradition has it for many, many years, and it includes this year as well, 2022, that the churches of Jerusalem, the 13 hierarchical churches of Jerusalem, and there you go, you see, I used the word hierarchy, celebrate the week from the 22nd of January, not the 18th, till the 30th of January, not the 25th. Why? Because there are, as I said, a hierarchy of 13 churches which would like to host and celebrate together this week, but they start a little bit later because the liturgical calendar in Jerusalem is such. In other words, the churches that go to Bethlehem to celebrate the Feast of the Nativity, Christmas, if you will, means that they cannot do it before the 22nd, given that the Armenian Orthodox Church in Jerusalem celebrates Christmas, what is known as Theophany, on the 18th to the 19th of January. So they've tweaked it a little bit to satisfy those practical realities that Jerusalemites and Palestinians feel and go through every year. So that's basically what the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity is. An ecumenism that translates into a fellowship that comes together, where the cafeterialization that the Armenian priest spoke about and that I sort of tweaked and added to a little bit is what, in my opinion, has changed the faith into religions, into different religions and different traditions. So you have one Christian church doing one thing and another Christian thing doing another, which goes contrary to basically the beliefs that the core beliefs that most Christians, no matter their traditional, Orthodox, Catholic, Reform, Evangelical, whatever they are, should believe in. Now, as I also said, that this ecumenism, this coming together of the churches, rediscovering what brought them together initially some 2,000 years ago, two things here for you to keep in mind, and there are things that are recurrent for me when I speak about these issues. One, for us in the West to remember that the church, the Christian faith, started in the East. It started in Bethlehem, Nazareth, Jerusalem, and then went to Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, and then across the world. So that basically is important for us to remember, not because Arabs have to be Arab Christians by and large are uppity about it, but because they basically have been witnesses to that faith in the land where the whole gospel story unfolded. And we should always remember that, so that we do not have this colonialist impression that, oh, they don't know what they're doing, we know better here. Well, whether we know better here or not does not decry the fact that it all started, the story unfolded there. This is very important, I believe, for us to remember. And the other thing that I would like also to say is that those differences are not only differences that are in the East. Those differences also happen in the West. So it's a question of that sense of fellowship and ecumenism, which is why there is the mothership, the World Council of Churches. Then there are the regional councils of churches across the world, which try to bring people together, or which try to facilitate that coming together, that fellowship, without necessarily altering the traditions and diversity, the richness that every church brings into the lives of its parishioners and across the whole spectrum. And I would like to end with just one story, which for me defines that sense of coming together far more than all these traditions and celebrations and institutional attempts to have this event here and that event there. Let me go back a couple of decades, the year 2000, when the Christian churches were celebrating the year of the Jubilee. In other words, a new 1,000-year millennium was coming in from the 1900s to the 2000s. And for that event, I was at the time in Jerusalem, involved both with ecumenical work with the churches of Jerusalem and also with political track 2 negotiations on the Israel-Palestine conflict. And I was given the task by my committee to organize a celebration of all the 13 traditional churches of Jerusalem to come together and to celebrate their togetherness. Not going to say their oneness, that's a bit too ambitious. They celebrate their togetherness, their fellowship. And that comes on the back of a lot of differences, where if you go back even a few decades before that, there were churches that refused to talk to each other because they thought that, well, this church does not subscribe to our understanding of the faith. This church has basically betrayed the teachings of Jesus or whatever. I'm slightly inflating to make the point. So I was given that task, and I managed actually to bring together all 13 churches into Bethlehem to celebrate the year of the Jubilee together. And they were all sat on a podium, the leaders of the 13 churches, from the Greek Orthodox Patriarch to the Armenian Orthodox Apostolic Patriarch to the Latin Catholic Rite Patriarch, and then to the 10 bishops and archbishops, were all sat there together. The background was Manger Square, and therefore, you guessed it, the church or the Basilica of the Nativity in St. Catherine's Church. And they basically together interacted together. And the moment that really defined for me this ecumenical event, this coming together in a tradition in Jerusalem, as one of the most knowledgeable people on ecumenism, Father Franz Baun in Jerusalem would tell you, and far better than I would, that one of the most impressive moments came when I invited all 13 leaders, those patriarchs with all those pectoral crosses and with all the self-importance associated with all the trimmings, I invited them to stand up and to recite the Lord's Prayer. In Arabic, Abana Alladhi, in English, Our Father, in Armenian, Hayr Mer. Everybody to recite that prayer, the Lord's Prayer, in their own language together. It showed, it defined their belief in the one core lesson of the faith, but at the same time, it also underlay the diverse traditions and diverse languages that they brought together. This in Bethlehem, in Palestine, in the heart of the story of Christmas, and next door in Jerusalem of Easter. So I leave you with that story. I'm not going to go into the what happened and what didn't happen, the white doves that did not fly and all that. You got the image. So I leave it at that, with that story for you to mull over during this week of prayer for Christian unity. And I will put in the description box 3 links. The first link will be from the World Council of Churches on the week of prayer for Christian unity. The second link from the Middle East Council of Churches on the week of unity. And the third one is from the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem about their delayed celebrations of this week, and some thoughts springing from the Holy Land. And the image, background image I've chosen this time for my YouTube episode is a history on Christian unity and ecumenism that you will also find when you click one of those 3 links. I wish you well. This is something that is a little bit specialist, so I didn't give it a theme, a name, a number, just a few thoughts, rather quick thoughts, on an event that beholds a lot of Christians, much more, by the way, in the East than here in the West, and to basically share with you what I think is happening on the ground. If we look at that sense of what it means to have Christian unity, then maybe we wouldn't worry too much about the empty pews in churches. Take care and all the best.